Hello, I am Nidhi Chauhan. I am working as Assistant Professor, School of Law, KIIT University, Bhubaneswar. I am presenting the module that is Prevention of Atrocities against Scheduled Castes and Scheduled Tribes. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with a reason and conscience and should act towards one another in spirit of brotherhood. Everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth or other status. Everyone has right to life, liberty and security of person. No one can be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. The scheduled caste and scheduled tribes are the two most disadvantaged segments of the weaker section of our society. Atrocities are committed on them on account of their economic dependence on non-scheduled caste and scheduled tribes landowners, educational backwardness and social discrimination. The scheduled castes suffer from the stigma of untouchability, age-old caste prejudices and practice of untouchability against them lead to commission of atrocities. To protect them from all types of exploitation, a number of safeguards have been provided in the Constitution of India. Under Article 15, no citizen shall on grounds only of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth or any of them be subject to any disability, liability, restriction or condition with regard to access of shops, public restaurants, hotels and places of public entertainment, the use of wells, tanks, bathing ghats, roads and places of public resort maintained wholly or partly out of state funds or dedicated to the use of general public. Article 17 of the Constitution of India talks about abolition of untouchability and its practice in any form is forbidden and punishable under law. Trafficking in human beings and forced labour is prohibited under Article 23 of the Constitution of India. Special enactments have been made by the central and the state governments to protect scheduled caste and scheduled tribes from all forms of exploitation. Article 17 is very particular manifestation of the fundamental right of equality in our typical social context. In the Hindu social system, the classification of people is done into four classes. They are Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and the Shudras. The Shudras were at the lowest ladder whose duty was prescribed to serve the first three classes. In the course of time, the Shudras became untouchables. Various social, economic and political disabilities were imposed on them. They were called achut or untouchables as they were not allowed to touch physically any member of the first three classes. Abolition of untouchability flows from all the articles guaranteeing equality in all its aspects. Article 17 is a specific assertion of the same. The outstanding feature of Article 17 as that of Article 15 Clause 2 is that it protects an individual from discrimination not only by the state but also by private persons. Article 17 should be read along with Article 35 Clause A subclause 2 which confers on Parliament exclusive power to make laws providing for punishment for those acts which are declared to be offences under Part 3 of the Constitution. Under Article 35 Clause A subclause 2, Parliament enacted Untouchability Offences Act. Initially, The Untouchability Offences Act 1955 had been enacted to abolish the practice of untouchability and social disabilities arising out of it against members of the scheduled caste. It was amended in 1976 and is now known as the Protection of Civil Rights Act 1955. To check the commission of atrocities on scheduled caste and scheduled tribes, the Scheduled Caste and the Scheduled Tribes Prevention of Atrocities Act 1989 came into force. Before going deep into the act, we should know what is the meaning of untouchability. So, neither the Constitution nor the Protection of Civil Rights Act defines untouchability. Untouchability, however, is not defined in the Constitution, presuming that it is known to all. But the word is understood to cover different acts in different parts of India, and the only common feature amongst them may be said to be the humiliation of the person who is untouchable. Mahatma Gandhi coined the word Harijan to name these untouchables, so that the word Harijan prima facie refers to an untouchable. Article 17 is self-operating, and if read with Article 39, Clause A, Subclause 2, it would follow that untouchability has been abolished and its practice in any form is forbidden. According to Dr. Ambedkar, untouchability is the notion of defilement, pollution, contamination, and the ways and means of getting rid of that defilement. It is a permanent hereditary strain which nothing can clean. According to Oxford Study Dictionary, the expression untouchable means a member of the lower Hindu group in India held to defile members of a higher caste on contact. The practice of non-touching of a non-caste man by a higher caste man and consequent denial of social, religion or caste equality, refusal of admittance or access to place of worship, bathing ghats, tanks, wells, community halls, shops, public restaurants, hotels and place of entertainment, educational institutions. It includes refusal of professional service to a Harijan on the ground of being Harijan or offering him insults because of his being so. It is an attitude to regard Dalits as pollutants, inferiors and outcast. In the case of State of MP versus Ramakrishna Politis, it was held that Article 17 read with Protection of Civil Rights Act 1955 seek to serve threefold purposes. The first one is outlawed the disabilities to which Dalits are subjected to. Second, they are made an offence under the Act. And the third is provided rights enforceable as civil rights. In the case of Dev Raja versus Padmana, the court observed that the subject matter of Article 17 was not untouchability in its literal and grammatical sense, but the practice as it had developed historically in this country. The court observed that the word untouchability refers to those regarded as untouchables in the course of historic development. A literal construction of the term would include persons who are treated as untouchables either temporarily or otherwise for various reasons, such as they are suffering from an epidemic or contagious disease. A report issued by the National Commission for Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribes in 1997 underscored that untouchability is the imposition of social disabilities on persons by reason of their birth in certain caste. The prevalence of untouchability practices was also noted by the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination in 1996, while reviewing India's 10th to 14th periodic reports under the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. Although constitutional provisions and legal texts exist to abolish untouchability and to protect the members of the scheduled caste and tribes, and social and educational policies have been adopted to improve the situation of members of the scheduled caste and tribes and to protect them from abuses, widespread discrimination against those people and the relative impunity of those who abuses them points to the limited effect of these measures. The committee is particularly concerned at reports that people belonging to the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes are often prevented from using wells or from entering cafes or restaurants, and that their children are sometimes separated from other children in schools in violation of Article 5F of the Convention. Special social enactments have come into force from time to time for SCs and STs in order to uphold the constitutional mandate and safeguard the interest of this section of the society. The major legal enactments at the national level are: the first one is Protection of Civil Rights Act 1955, and the second one is Scheduled Caste, Scheduled Tribes Prevention of Atrocities Act 1989. The Protection of Civil Rights Act 1955 was enacted in furtherance of Article 17 of the Constitution to abolish untouchability and its practice in any form. The Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribes Prevention of Atrocities Act 1989 was brought into force from 30th January 1990 in order to check and deter crimes against scheduled caste and scheduled tribes by persons belonging to other communities. These enactments have extended the positive discrimination in favor of SCs and STs to the field of criminal law, in as much as they prescribe penalties that are more stringent than the corresponding offences under Indian Penal Code and other laws. Now we discuss about the Prevention of Atrocities Act 1989. Untouchability Offences Act 1955 was the first legislation passed by the Parliament to prevent practice of untouchability and punish people for practicing it. To broaden its scope and provide for stringent punishment, it was amended and renamed as the Protection of Civil Rights Act in 1976. However, the law was found to be inadequate to check and deter crimes against them committed by non-scheduled caste and non-scheduled tribes. It is considered necessary that not only the term atrocity should be defined, but also its stringent measures should be introduced to provide for higher punishment for committing such atrocities. Therefore, a more comprehensive and punitive piece of legislation called the Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribes Prevention of Atrocities Act 1989 was enacted. The purpose of the act was to prevent atrocities and help in social inclusion of Dalits into the society. The Prevention of Atrocities Act delineates specific crimes against scheduled caste and scheduled tribes as atrocities and describes strategies and prescribes punishment to counter these acts. The Act attempts to curb and punish violence against Dalits through three broad means. Firstly, it identifies what acts constitute atrocities. Secondly, The Act calls upon all the states to convert an existing sessions court in each district into a special court to try cases registered under the Prevention of Atrocities Act. Thirdly, the Act creates provisions for states to declare areas with high level of caste violence to be atrocity prone and to appoint qualified officers to monitor and maintain law and order. This legislation aims at preventing commission of offence by persons other than scheduled caste and scheduled tribes against scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. The Act provides for punishment for offences of atrocities committed against scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. Comprehensive rules under the Act were notified in the year 1995, which inter alia provides norm for relief and rehabilitation. The Act is implemented by the respective state, government and union territory administrations, which are provided due central assistance under the centrally sponsored scheme for effective implementation of the provisions of the Act. Now we will discuss who is offender, victim and what are the offences. So first of all, who is an offender? Any person who is not a member of a scheduled caste or a scheduled tribe and commits an offence listed in the Act against a member of a scheduled caste or a scheduled tribe is an offender. Now, who is a victim? The victim is a member of a scheduled caste or a scheduled tribe against whom the offence is committed by the offender. Section 3, it talks about the offences which are mentioned under the Act. Here, first of all, it says atrocity is defined under section 2(1)(a) as an offence punishable under section 3 of the Act. Offences which are mentioned under section 3 are like force to eat or drink an offensive or uneatable substance. Other one is caused annoyance, injury or insult by an excreta or waste matter being dumped in his premises or neighbourhood. Paraded naked or with painted face or body, wrongfully deprived of cultivation of his land, wrongfully deprived of his rights over any land, premises or water, forced to do beggary or work as a bonded labourer. The other offences are prevented from exercising his right to vote or according to his wishes, subjected to false legal proceedings, caused injury or annoyance by a public servant on the basis of false information given to him, deliberately insulted and humiliated in public view, a woman who is sexually assaulted, deprived of his right to clean drinking water, deprived of his right of passage to a public place, forced to leave his house or village, falsely implicated in a criminal case which might result in his imprisonment or execution, intended harm or injury by burning a place of his dwelling or worship, wrongfully caused injury or subjected to any offence by a public servant. Beside this, subsection 2 of section 3 of the Act provides that whoever, not being a member of a scheduled caste or a scheduled tribe, the first one is gives or fabricates false evidence, intending thereby to cause or knowing it to be likely that he will thereby cause any member of a scheduled caste or a scheduled tribe to be convicted of an offence which is capital by the law, for the time being in force shall be punished with imprisonment for life and with fine. And if an innocent member of a scheduled caste or a scheduled tribe be convicted and executed in consequence of such fabricated evidence, the person who gives or fabricates such false evidence shall be punished with death. Second, gives or fabricates false evidence intending thereby to cause or knowing it to be likely that he will thereby cause any member of a scheduled caste or a scheduled tribe to be convicted of an offence which is not capital but punishable with imprisonment for a term of 7 years or upwards, shall be punishable with imprisonment for a term which shall not be less than 6 months, but which may extend to 7 years or upwards, or with fine. Third, commits mischief by fire or any explosive substance intending to cause or knowing it to be likely that he will thereby cause damage to any property belonging to a member of a scheduled caste or a scheduled tribe, shall be punishable with imprisonment for a term which shall not less than 6 months, but which may extend to 7 years, and with fine. Fourth, commits mischief by fire or an explosive substance intending to cause or knowing it to be likely that he will thereby cause destruction of any building which is ordinarily used as a place of worship or as a place of human dwelling or as a place for custody of the property by a member of a scheduled caste or a scheduled tribe, shall be punishable with imprisonment for life and with fine. Fifth, commits any offence under the Indian Penal Code punishable with imprisonment for a term of 10 years or more against a person or property on the ground that such person is a member of a scheduled caste or a scheduled tribe, or such property belongs to such member, shall be punishable with imprisonment for life and with fine. Sixth, knowingly or having reason to believe that an offence has been committed, causes any evidence of the commission of that offence to disappear with the intention of screening the offender from legal punishment, or with that intention gives any information respecting the offence which he knows or believes to be false, shall be punishable with the punishment provided for that offence. Or seventh, being a public servant commits any offence under section 3 shall be punishable with imprisonment for a term which shall not be less than 1 year, but which may extend to the punishment provided for that offence. All offences listed in the Act are cognizable. The police can arrest the offender without warrant and start investigation into the case without taking any orders from the court. The Act prescribes both minimum as well as maximum punishment. The minimum in most cases is 6 months imprisonment, while the maximum is 5 years sentence and with fine. In some cases, the minimum is enhanced to 1 year, while the maximum goes up to life imprisonment or even death sentence. According to section 4, if a public servant who is not a member of the scheduled caste or the scheduled tribe deliberately neglects his duties which he should perform under the Act, he is liable for punishment with imprisonment up to 6 months. Section 14 of the Act states about the constitution of special courts for hearing cases on atrocities against scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. For the purpose of providing speedy trial, the state government shall, with the concurrence of the Chief Justice of the High Court, establish in each district a court of sessions to be a special court exclusively to try the offences under this Act. Section 15 of the Act provides that for every special court, the state government shall specify a public prosecutor or appoint an advocate who has been in practice as an advocate for not less than 7 years as a special public prosecutor for the purpose of conducting cases in that court. Section 23 of the Act talks about investigation and rehabilitation. It authorizes the central government to frame rules for carrying out the purposes of the Act. It was drawing power from this Section 23 that the Scheduled Castes and the Scheduled Tribes Prevention of Atrocities Rules 1995 were framed. According to Rule 7(1), investigation of offence committed under the Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribes Act cannot be investigated by an officer not below the rank of Deputy Superintendent of Police. In the case of D. Ramalinga Reddy versus State of Andhra Pradesh, the Andhra Pradesh High Court took the position that provisions of Rule 7 are mandatory and held that investigation under the Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribes Act has to be carried out only by an officer not below the rank of Deputy Superintendent of Police. So, there are some of the lacking points, or we can say loopholes in the Act. The Act is with many teeth but which seldom bites. Although the Prevention of Atrocities Act is a powerful and precise weapon on paper, in practice the Act has suffered from a near complete failure in implementation. Policemen have displayed a consistent unwillingness to register offences under the Act. In most cases, unwillingness to file a FIR under the Acts comes from caste bias. Upper caste policemen are reluctant to file cases against fellow caste members because of the severity of the penalties imposed by the Act. A report in 2010 discussing the performance of the Scheduled Caste, Scheduled Tribes Prevention of Atrocities Act 1989 finds that at the end of 2007, 79% of cases remain pending for trial at criminal courts, showing no significant improvement over a pendency rate of 82.5% in 2001. Besides these, the other main deficiencies in the Act is Section 14, which merely requires the state governments to specify for each district a sessions court to be a special court to try atrocities, contradicting the very purpose of providing for a speedy trial. Merely calling an existing court a special court cannot speed up a trial. The law ought to have provided for a special court in each district exclusively to try cases of atrocities on day-to-day basis with corresponding provisions for an exclusive special public prosecutor and a special investigating officer. Among the other major deficiencies in the Act is omission of social and economic boycott as a crime, non-provision of death penalty as in the Indian Penal Code, non-availability of protection for the victims. I would like to conclude by saying that the Prevention of Atrocities Act is a powerful weapon on paper. In practice, the Act has suffered a complete failure in implementation. The primary obstacles to implementation are intended to be the primary enforcers of the Act, that is, the lowest rungs of the police and bureaucracy that form the primary node of interaction between the state and society in the rural areas. With a view to strengthening the law to prevent atrocities against scheduled caste and scheduled tribes, a bill was introduced in the Lok Sabha on 16 July 2014, which makes willful neglect of duties by public servants in issues relating to atrocities a punishable offence. The bill also makes provisions for state governments to establish exclusive special court to try offences under the Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribes Prevention of Atrocities Act 1989. A positive step to check occurrence of atrocities is to identify atrocity-prone areas and take preventive measures so that incidents of atrocities do not occur. Section 21 of the Prevention of Atrocities Act 1889 enjoins upon the state governments to conduct periodic surveys of the working of the Act with a view to suggesting measures for better implementation of the provisions of the Act and for identification of areas where scheduled caste and scheduled tribes persons are likely to be victims of atrocities, so as to take preventive action to check occurrence of such crimes. To mitigate the financial and other hardships faced by scheduled caste and scheduled tribes victims of atrocities, monetary relief and rehabilitation facilities are provided to them by the concerned state governments. Thank you.